hopefully can get the meeting organized. So welcome, I'm Charlie Zully. I'm chair of this Blue Line Corridor Management Committee, but also chair of the Met Council. And I just want to greet those who are members, those who are alternates, those who are members of the public for coming. This has been a great trip along the way. Just a couple of little housekeeping items. I have been informed that these microphones are live. There's no little light on it, but if you're having my little sidebar conversation with Riva here, it'll all be recorded for posterity, so just keep that in mind. Also know that the handouts today, anything you see will be on our website. That's bluelineext.org. So why don't we start the meeting by introducing ourselves, and rather than in a virtual world where I have to call people out, if we could just go around a table, and starting with the Vice Chair, Commissioner Fernando.
Thank you, Irene Fernando, Hennepin County Commissioner, District 2, and the Railroad Authority Chair.
Alicia Perry, co-chair of the Business Advisory Committee for the Blue Line Project.
Nick Thompson, Deputy General Manager, Metro Transit.
Jason Greenberg, co-chair Community Advisory Committee.
Bill Blonigan, Robbinsdale Mayor.
Lee Kagazian. I'm a program coordinator at Kira, here for C. Terrence Anderson.
I'm Kathy Gold. I'm with Hennepin County Public Works Administration.
I'm Becca Thompson with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board.
Mike Barnes, and that's Metro District Engineer.
Tanya West Hafner, Brooklyn Park City Council.
Jeremiah Ellison, City of Minneapolis, Ward 5.
Suzanne Sabatka, Senior Policy Aide for Infrastructure and Legislative Affairs, here representing Mayor Fry.
Jim Adams, Mayor of Crystal.
Jeff Lundy, District 1, Hennepin County Commissioner.
Hello, I'm Robert Lilligren, Met Council, District 7.
Hi, I'm Reva Chambliss, Metropolitan Council, District 2, and also Transportation Committee Vice Chair.
Well, again, welcome. Before we dive into the agenda, just a couple other quick things. First, I want to make sure we introduce Chris Beckwith. Chris, are you in the? There you are. Okay, Chris Beckwith is our new project manager. And no mystery, many of you know Chris because she's had multiple roles at Metro Transit, and including the last 4 years managing the Gold Line to great success, and has had experience with as an assistant project manager here at the Blue Line and the Green Line. So you've been around a lot of different projects. So after an international search, we have this expertise in our backyard. So I'm really thrilled, Chris, that you are here on the case with the Blue Line. Welcome. Also, I just want to thank everybody who participated in our bus tours along the alignment. That was so wonderful, and I know many of you were part of it. And Irene and I Commissioner Fernando and I have been talking about a roundtable, a conversation about displacement, and somehow and we're still talking about that, but the idea of actually having a tour, not just to see various route configurations, but actually to hear stories from the places we're connecting. And I thought that was wonderfully powerful. So I really appreciate those that were part of the tour, those who spoke. And I know that all those specific experiences kind of really do matter, and we'll have more opportunities. And when we hear what we're talking about in a room, but we'll have more opportunities to get out and around. First off, I want to get to the meeting summary, which seemed like just the other day, June 9th. That was sent out in advance. That was our meeting. We don't call it minutes for some reason. We call them a meeting summary. But is there any edits or any corrections or questions? And if not, I'd entertain a motion and a second to approve those meeting summaries.
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. That meeting summary will be posted on the website if you would like to see it in the future. Now we're marching into our committee reports of the Community and Business Advisory Committee. And why don't we start with the Community Advisory Committee co-chair, Jason. You're here. So
Thanks for having me.
And then we're going to follow by the Business Advisory Committee Chair, Felicia, who's sitting right here. So welcome.
Hi. So we had our meeting last night and covered much of the material that's going to be shared today. Not a huge turnout for our last meeting of this phase of the project, but we did talk about how people will reapply and we'll reconvene, I think, through discussions in August and September, have our next meeting in October. Did get some questions to see Terrence and also learned about the design environmental next step. So not a ton of questions, but a good meeting nonetheless, and looking forward to the next phase.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Felicia?
Yes, Business Advisory Committee, similar updates. We got a report from Ed from Cura to talk about the updates with the anti-displacement work group. That was a point of pretty good discussion. Afterwards, some questions raised, recommendations around, particularly concerns around the timeline again of where anti-displacement work group is with where they're releasing any recommendations. There were a couple of requests from the Business Advisory Committee to have the anti-displacement work group actually report to us each month or at each of our meetings. People really appreciated having the updates from a person and getting a bit more detail and learning a bit about the website that they have. So you all will probably hear about that today, so I won't go into it. But it was good feedback there. We also went over the design and environmental next steps. I feel like it was a lot to digest, so I'm looking forward to hearing it again today. So yeah, that's our update from there. Oh yeah, we also talked about recruiting folks for the next iteration of what the Business Advisory Committee looks like in this next phase of work.
Well, Felicia Perry, Jason Greenberg, thank you for your service. I can't believe this has been, I'm just reading the notes, it's 23 months. I mean, I kept referring to it as a year. It's not, it's just 2 years. And, your work, as you say, I learn things not just by reading, but by hearing and talking. And I think that this kind of engagement and your deliberations and your questions and your, you're holding us all to a challenge that we had to get this right, and really appreciate that commitment and your steadfast persistence. And you both alluded to the fact that we're doing a kind of a reiteration, and we're going to hear about that in a minute from Sophia, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows this doesn't happen very easily, and I always kind of say it's not a straight line. So your engagement along the way and your whole committee has been really valuable. So thank you so much for that work. And as you say, many people have still interest. So keep challenging. We're at it. This is a marathon, and we'll count on you to keep coming, and your committee members. But Sophia, you're going to give us a little bit more of an outline as to how this is going to work.
Yeah, just very brief, just
Okay.
so that everybody is on the same page. It's really important to have engaged members on both of our BAC and CAC, and it is a big commitment to be with us for all these months, spending many a morning or an evening diving deep into the details. So the committees are composed of appointments that are made by Hennepin County and Met Council, as well as appointments from basically all of our municipal partners. And then there's some chambers as well that are involved. And one of the things that we'll be doing differently with our BAC moving forward is that each municipality will also be having a spot specifically for a nonprofit member. That's to kind of strengthen the voice of community-based organizations within that context, and often nonprofits are operating very much like businesses. So we want to recognize them in that space and elevate their voices through the next step as well. So in terms of process, regarding that is that all of our municipal partners will be receiving letters from the project team at the end of July, giving them about just over a month through the month of August to work on reappointing their members. We have a little bit of leeway space in September, just in case sometimes you get your contingency, but maybe you're missing a certain voice and it takes a little bit longer. Once we have the appointments from our municipal partners, we will be coming back to our Met Council and Hennepin County members, just to make sure that we're not appointing the same folks. And we'll be looking forward to your approval of that slate of candidates. As we discussed, all of the Met Council and Hennepin County representatives that wish to continue on either committee, we're asking them to reapply, but we're assuming that we're just giving them the green thumb to continue, just because that is a good way to recognize their service and their commitment and all they've done for us this past couple years. So that is what to expect. If you weren't following the timeline exactly, that means that their first meeting will be in October. So it'll take the month of August and September to get them on board, and off we go.
Perfect. Great. Any questions for Sophia about how this works? We want to keep some voices at the table. We want some new voices. So it's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, big agenda item today. We're going to get project updates, but we also really have been looking forward to the update from anti-displacement. I should mention, I should have said this at the top of the meeting, there's another group coming here and actually using this room at 3 o'clock, so I'm going to try to have a hard stop. I don't want to say that at 5 minutes to 3, but and I think we have plenty of time, but I wanted to mention that. And also, sadly, Terrence is on an airplane. It's either on some tarmac, but it's not in Minnesota, so no, okay. These things happen in the travel business, I'm told. Now, if he had taken a bus, he might be here, but he didn't. All right. So anyway, but we're fortunate to have Lee Gugaisian. Close enough?
Yeah, that was great.
Artist named Lee Gugaisian, so there you go. And then Kathy Gold, who we all know, to give us an update. You've had a lot of work since our last meeting, a full day, Saturday. Robust conversations, so we're looking forward to hearing where we stand.
Well, first, Chair, I thought we'd let Lee give us a little bit of her background.
Oh, that'd be
so
great.
we understand where her experience and skills lie, and then I'll give her the floor to start out our presentation. Thank you.
Right.
Good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here for Terrence. Big shoes to fill. This is my 3rd week in this job, so really diving right in.
Nice.
3rd week back in Minnesota. I'm coming from Oregon's Housing Finance Agency, where I did a lot of anti-displacement work and formula and funding allocation for low-income housing tax credits. I'm coming back to Minnesota. I went to school at McAllister College, where I studied urban geography. I was an urban scholar with the city of Minneapolis. And then I went to UCLA to pursue a master's in urban and regional planning, and then worked at Kira 3 years ago as a research assistant. So very glad to be coming back. Excited to dive right in. I was just remembering 5 years ago I was working at Kimley Horn and created ridership surveys for the Blue Line extension.
Wow.
So it feels full circle in a way. So very excited to be here. And I guess we can dive right in. So starting with...
Welcome back.
Oh,
We're so
thank you.
thrilled.
Thank you. Very glad to be here. So our June 4th event was a day-long workshop at Juxtaposition Arts in North Minneapolis. And we formed, as you know, the Anti-Displacement Work Group to be facilitators of these big conversations. So the event was very well attended. It went from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., so a lot of time to have a lot of great discussions. So starting with reviewing data, we reviewed data analysis and key trends from previous light rail projects and examined demographic changes, changes in income, and displacement indicators such as eviction rates, especially along the Green Line. So we learned more about anti-displacement and what the experience of different communities has been with different forms of displacement. So cultural displacement, housing displacement, the displacement of businesses. And then we had a panel of folks who came and shared their experiences with displacement along these previous iterations of light rail. So all that to say, the meeting was very centered around people's experiences with displacement and what displacement means to them. which leads well into the next piece, which is co-defining displacement. So it's important, we think, that when we come to the table to talk about anti-displacement strategies, we have a shared understanding of what displacement means. So we had lots of discussions on that, and then moving to the next point, we reviewed anti-displacement policies, 27 of them, I think, from across the country, and also looked at policies that have been used here in the Twin Cities as well. And I'll get into that more later in the presentation. And then the last point, which is important, is on June 4th, I think, Terrence likes to say we started where a lot of processes may have ended, which is what are some policies that we can implement to mitigate the impacts of displacement. And so we want to kind of find out where folks are interested in and invested already, and what policies we might need to focus more on and model and kind of create more nuance around as we move forward. So what can we do and what impact will it have? And so we're still continuing to decide what to focus on, and we want to have more involvement from folks here on what we're discussing. So to that end, we have put a greater emphasis on increasing access to information for this project and connection points for folks. So logistically, there's a YouTube link with this whole 6-hour meeting on YouTube. So feel free to watch the whole thing if you weren't there, or pieces of it, which is...
There is a summary as well. So if you want the cliff notes of that, there is a summary.
Yeah, summary might be the way to go, but there are some interesting pieces. And then all meeting materials, including the presentation, data, the policy matrix I mentioned, are listed on the My Blue Line Extension webpage. And then we've added 2 open houses that will cover the same topics we talked about the week of August 15th, and those dates are being finalized this week. So then moving on to some of the key takeaways, starting with research on how each light rail line has had a different effect on the timing of displacement. So a trend we're seeing is that the Blue Line Extension will experience development pressures and the pressures of displacement earlier than other lines. So we already have kind of come to the shared understanding that displacement has happened as a result of previous light rails. And the real question we're trying to answer here is, what did that look like in more detail? So the existing Blue Line experienced displacement after the opening of the line. The existing Green Line experienced displacement after receiving the full funding grant agreement from the FTA. And then the Green Line extension was even earlier with its displacement effects, where the trend for the Blue Line extension may feel pressures even earlier than the other lines. So that is the trend we are seeing. So I think we learned that when the first Blue Line was built, it took the opening for people to acknowledge its presence and say, okay, this is here. So redevelopment started to creep in more slowly. With the Central Corridor, people were more aware. And so now we have this precedent in the Twin Cities of these big infrastructure development projects and what can happen after them. So we imagine there will be people getting in line earlier for redevelopment. So it's important for us to start thinking now about how to best mitigate that potential displacement earlier on. So displacement has occurred even as a result of the previous alignment of this light rail. And we know it can be tiring for folks to keep talking and talking about a project that is years away. But I think that existing displacement of an alignment that didn't happen shows us the importance of starting these conversations now. And so then moving on to specifically the Green Line investment framework, we have this opportunity to examine what worked and didn't work for residents and businesses along the Green Line, and to implement this feedback into our efforts moving forward. So as I previously mentioned, we had a panelist of 6 folks join us to inform us what worked and didn't work for them, and we heard that more investment dollars and then earlier implementation would have been beneficial. Some other things we heard was that there's a need for more specific and personalized assistance to different types of businesses. Big box retail is different from a locally independently owned business. And then there is not enough done to help vulnerable households. And there is a big, I think, focus on units as opposed to people within households. So we met our goals with the creation of subsidized units, but there was a lot less focus on helping existing households where they were at and reaching residents on an individual level. And then also folks emphasized the need to have separate outreach efforts for residents and businesses. And then the next slide. Okay. So if you go to the My Blue Line EXT, you can find all of the previous meeting materials, including all the different policies we looked at. I would really encourage folks to spend some time with this. As I said, there's 27 different policies, and then the graphic kind of breaks up 3 different phases of development and what policies might be implemented at different phases, and then also what types of displacement they're seeking to mitigate. This might be a good opportunity to watch the part of the YouTube video. I think this part was very interesting. And so then our anti-displacement work group had recommendations to mitigate displacement. And so this is when we kind of split folks up into small groups to talk about, of these policies, which ones do we need to spend more time with, and which ones do we need to develop increased nuance around. So there are many ways to implement rent control, different tax policies in different jurisdictions. So I think beyond identifying what the policies are, what do we need to spend more time with? And so within these meetings, I think we had a lot of interesting questions asked, but some key ones were when folks are inevitably displaced, because we cannot prevent all displacement, how do we care for them? And what are different strategies we can employ along the line to mitigate displacement, which seems to be the big question. And then next slide, please. So then I think this co-defining displacement is really important, as I previously mentioned. And so we asked folks, what do you mean by displacement, and what does this look like to you? So some of the things that came out of that include changes that force people out or make them feel like they're no longer welcome in their home. People being forced out of a location and not being able to afford to live or work there anymore. An increase in housing prices, businesses being forced out of the neighborhood, the deconstruction and demolition of communities for economic gain, and then a feeling of home or physical home not being available or accessible anymore. And then people brought up this idea of white flight and a return of those who had fled back to previously undesirable neighborhoods. So I think it's important for us to get on the same page about displacement and what that looks like for folks. And this helps give us the direction in terms of what policies we should be focusing on. So gentrification is very difficult to define, as we all know, and looks different even between neighborhoods in the same city. So a textbook definition can only go so far. So really hearing from people on the panel, having these small groups was a really important way for us to learn what displacement looks like in different jurisdictions and geographies on the ground.
So this slide really points to this community-based project website that was developed at mybluelineext.org, and we have a specific spot for anti-displacement efforts where we list the membership roster. People are interested in knowing who in the community are actually on the community-based work group. In addition to the workshop and meeting recordings and summaries of those meetings, the meeting materials, the presentations of all of the research done thus far, our news releases and interviews, and what our upcoming meeting schedules is. And in addition to just the anti-displacement, it's an overall place where community can come and learn different aspects of the project and be engaged with putting in their ideas or their concerns so that project staff can be responsive to those questions.
So what is next? So public open houses. So as I said previously, we're building out a plan for increased open houses, connection points for folks, and focus groups. So there will be 2 open houses, as I said, covering the same content the week of August 15th. And then we have more full-length Saturday meetings. The next one will be on housing and cultural displacement on September 24th. And then the other dates will be November 12th for business development and February 11th for finalizing recommendations. And then we're really trying to make an effort to get into the community and engage businesses specifically along the corridor, and residents to ensure that they really feel like they're having an opportunity to contribute to this work and guide the vision. And then, as I've said many times, we're working to identify what areas require increased nuance and discussion, and I think that is a question for today here too. Of all these policies, what do you think we need to spend more time digging into, fleshing out, modeling? Yeah.
So another piece of this is,
Are those meeting dates you just explained, are they in the handout somewhere? I don't see them.
they're on the website, but we'll be doing a media push as well to get that out into the public for participation.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Kim. So in addition to our community-based work group, we have internal government work groups that are focusing on the information that was collected by the community anti-displacement work group and working through those things. So really just organizing right now around what came out of that meeting, and then looking at all the information that Kira put together with the policies that are nationwide in addition to here in the Twin Cities. We also took an inventory of all of the cities and the county and Metropolitan Council policies, programs, and investments. So we have that as well to kind of look at to see if we're really addressing some of the concerns that came out of that initial meeting. And so looking for the gaps, looking for where we can improve, and looking, to help make a real important community basis solution for mitigating displacement and gentrification. Any questions for us?
That's a lot of material, and I know we would be really interested in being here to really get in deep as to what some of those ideas are, but definitely other questions. I know many do.
Some comments.
Yeah, and comments and observation. Felicia.
I feel like I got to ask at the last meeting, so I kind of have.
All right, I'm just going to the right. I'll go to the left. Robert.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the report and the work on this, and welcome back, Lee. And when you were talking about the takeaways from the day-long workshop, you referenced a specific part of the YouTube videos. I think it had to do with the impacts on residents. Can you just point to that again for me, please? I didn't quite hear it.
Oh, yeah, so let me go to that slide here. So we had a panel of 6 folks come and kind of detail their experience with previous light rail construction and iterations and what worked and didn't work for them. And so I can get, I think, into more of those in more detail. But so some of those were that, like, we had adequate funding for technical assistance and support for businesses and residents, but there's a real need for constant and clear communication during construction. I think folks are especially interested in construction in general, and the concern is when we're doing all this construction with this extension, where are those folks coming from? Are they being employed from the communities we're doing construction in? And then just personalized outreach is really important. And then I would say the big piece, again, is that there was maybe not enough focus on helping households and people where they were at, but there was a large focus on the creation of subsidized units, and that we would stand to benefit from helping existing residents in place on an individual level.
Oh, and that was part of the panel, the 6-person panel. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councilmember Ellis.
Yeah. First, I want to thank you for the presentation. When I think about, I've described myself as cautiously optimistic about this project, and I'm optimistic because I think that this infrastructure is critically needed. And I've had a lot of conversations with certainly with Irene about that and other members of the panel. I think my caution is that, we won't get the anti-displacement work right, because other places haven't necessarily gotten it right in the way that I would like to see it. And so I want to thank you for the presentation. Usually I would regard sort of the nitty gritty of like solutions, that's sort of the policymaker's job. But I was curious from this work group, how sort of like granular or specific do you think recommendations out of this group are going to become? Are we going to be talking about exactly what kind of either, tax incentives or subsidy, or is it going to be more sort of high level on goals, and then the details will be sort of up to policymakers to figure out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the purpose of every government having their internal working groups along with the anti-displacement group is we want governments to be able to take the time to really think about what is realistic for us, what is realistic within our legal framework, within the resources we have, so that when we come to when governments come to conversation with community, they already have thought through a lot of the policies that we're speaking about. And so I think Terrence and I and everyone at this project has talked about this space, and the anti-displacement working group is really important for identifying, of these 27 policies, what do we need to really model out? Because rent control can look differently in each city. And so I think once we've established the policies that we think require further discussion and further nuance, I think we're hoping to really get into the nitty-gritty of those policies and supporting each government body as they think about what would it look like for us to implement this in reality, what is realistic for us right now, and if this policy is not realistic, what do we need to get to a place where we can implement this?
Great, yeah, thank you.
Right. I know you had a comment, Commissioner Fernando.
I do, thank you. So Lee, welcome. We are very clearly lucky to have you here. Appreciate the robustness and the method. And I'm really grateful for the identifying of the things that will make the largest difference. I think that's a little bit of what Councilmember Ellison's getting at. So if there is a review, if there's a parallel review needed in terms of both the authority of local entities as well as the will of those policymakers, I think that really supports some of the feedback around timing.
Mm-hmm.
So that means we need to be able to review in our separate entities in a way that allows us to activate more readily. The website's very easy to navigate. Maybe you just did it right now too, so did I. There's this Google Doc of the 27. So for example, right to counsel, ensuring that that people have representation is different than right to counsel. Having representation happens to be something that Hennepin County is working on. For example, I think we do represent 100% of people that are 150% of the poverty line and lower. We just got a report on this. So things like that, where it's this particular one is stated differently because they're mostly cities. So I'm inviting further accountability, particularly on the county side, so that we can have the time to receive the ideas and process them in ways that align with our authority. And if advocacy is needed around authority, that's state advocacy that we might be able to take on together. So I just want to put a finer point on that. This is the first time I'm getting to kind of receive this information, so I appreciate it. Thank you for people, not just units. That's something that we need to emphasize all the time. And then my last comment would be, in the commitment to increase access to information, which is appreciated, hence why I wanted to check the website. Felicia mentioned in your update, maybe there are some regular report. I don't know what regular reporting to whom looks like. I don't necessarily want you to be in meetings talking about what you've done every week either. But what you've offered here is very succinct, very robust, and is really, really good information to have in the public forum. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, I think the first piece, especially what you mentioned, we're hoping that by giving governments taking the time and space necessary to think through these policies, that leads to greater transparency, greater accountability, and it kind of pairs well with this inventory that Kathy was talking about of what are existing policies in place across all these jurisdictions. And then where are the gaps, and how does this policy matrix kind of fit in to each jurisdiction? And as I said, what is realistic versus what will it take to get here? So thank you.
Yeah, and one more comment. The counties are uniquely statutorily responsible to care for the vulnerable. And I really appreciate the emphasis on municipalities, of course. I'm not, trying to take anything away from that. And counties have a particular responsibility towards some of the conditions that you're outlining. And so I'm looking forward to where that goes.
Yeah, thank you. Good point.
Okay, thank you. Great comments. Ms. Perry.
Yes, I had just a couple questions, and I think it sort of ties in, it might tie into what things this committee might, certain nuances to look into. So I've been trying to find data around commercial property ownership, specifically to like how many businesses operating along, for this project, along this line or in that surrounding community actually lease, own the building that they're operating in, as well as if they don't lease or own it, who is the person who leases, owns it, demographic information about them, including where they live. Like, do they live here? Do they live in this community? Do they live in this state? And then also things like race, ethnicity, gender, and then their access to resources. Now, this could exist somewhere, maybe even separate somewhere, but I have yet to talk to anyone who can even point into the direction. And so I'm wondering if out of this we can, even at a very minimum level, get that sort of data along this line.
Sure, that's a great point. And that, as a GIS person by training, I think that would be
friends with you.
I know.
Here, I just want to be friends with you, Lee.
That I would love if that existed. And so I think what that requires is a combination of quantitative spatial data and then this qualitative missing piece data where we don't usually capture in spatial data sets race, ethnicity, people's experiences as a business owner. So I know Dr. Lewis at Cura has their team of qualitative researchers who have just secured, I know, increased funding to interview folks business owners along the corridor, and they won't be able to get to every single business, but I think we're trying to have a qualitative data set that is representative of the experience and demographic piece of what you're talking about. And then the data part is complicated in the sense that this project spans across multiple jurisdictions. And so the city of Minneapolis may have a robust commercial business inventory that might not be true of other cities and vice versa. And so I think that it would be ideal for us to get there, and I'm hoping we can. It will require combining multiple forms of data and then actually going out into community and doing qualitative interviews and figuring out how to pair that in a responsible way with quantitative data.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. My last thing was, I wanted to, thinking about your comment earlier when you were mentioning that the government policymakers taking into consideration the resources that they have available to them, I would add to consider the resources that you're anticipating in the same way that you build out a project like this and you think about all that money you're gonna raise for the thing, that when you're thinking about addressing anti-displacement, you're also thinking about your anticipated money, not just the current situation, because I think it's clear that it hasn't been allocated to it, so it probably doesn't exist as what we need. So just really be future thinking in that too, as you create what your strategy is over the next year, your next 2060 plan, or whatever the next increment is. I lose count, I'm getting old. But those things, think future thinking about like your resources as well.
Great question and answers. Well, Commissioner Lunda, I promised you to.
Oh, no, I'll try to be fast. The answer can be, it's in the video. And so I'll just ask it. Did they talk about, I think what Felicia was talking about is most people don't own, especially in certain parts of this line. I've heard numbers up to 70% rent, whether it's a business or it's a home. That makes them even more likely to run, or if I'm a landlord and somebody says, I want to give you money for your place, because I'm trying to put 3 properties together, I'm putting them together and put up condos, I may just decide to cash out. And so I think that's unique in this area. I don't want to say it's unique, but I feel like it is, and I know the data is what we really want to see to back that. What I feel is that that may drive some of that, gentrification faster. I also believe, and I don't want to start a holy war, that having rent control may drive it to happen faster as well, because people may want to sell out of their property that they rent, and people will convert it. And I'm watching the discussions that Minneapolis is having and the data that's getting presented to their committees so that I can become more informed. But I do concern about that, where people may decide, you know what, I'm going to sell out, and then up goes the 4-story condo that is not affordable for the people who used to live there. So if it's in the video, I'll watch the video. I know we have time constraints.
Great points. I think the last piece you said is why we feel it's important to model these policies out in different places. Rent control, we know, is contentious and has varying effects in different places. And so I think that's probably one we need to spend a lot more time with. And then to your first point, the video Ed Getz's part of the presentation shows the really interesting data on renters and also evictions, because as we know, eviction is a form of displacement. That data is really interesting, and we kind of model it. We show along the green line, and there's station areas and then comparison areas. So there's some really interesting data I would encourage folks to look at in Ed Getz's piece. And the nice part about the video is that you can just scroll your little thing through at the bottom and see where Ed is, and you do not have to watch the whole thing.
Perfect. Thank you.
You know what he looks like type thing?
Front.
I've been told that we can timestamp that video so you'll know like when the panel is there.
That is a good idea.
We're going to try to make it easier. Yeah.
Look for someone that looks a little bit like Eric Clapton.
I kind of have like a tactical question, and thank you for all your work and the presentation. You were just talking about displacement pressures and how they'll be even earlier for this line, and some of that has to do with the previous experience at the metro area and developers and everybody knows what's coming. Is that the main reason? Is there anything unique about the blue line that's going to create these pressures earlier than what we would normally see?
I think that's a great question, and I think it would probably be irresponsible for me to answer because I have just plugged into this project again after a few years, but do you want to take that one?
Potentially, along West Broadway, there are a number of commercial properties that are not functioning right now. So, and, just from the little research that I've done, I don't see that they're owned by people in the corridor. And so I think that is a great concern.
Fear of Rondo would be the answer of why people would check out sooner.
I don't want to listen to the crowd.
Residents are very afraid that this is going to be Rondo all over again, and they are very fearful. And they don't feel like anyone is listening. They don't feel like Met Council cares, and they don't feel like any of the elected politicians are on our side to protect us. And that's why people are fearful and may check out sooner along this route versus other routes, because we've seen what's happened to the communities of the Southwest Light Rail. We've seen what's happened along the Hiawatha Light Rail. We've had impact speakers who've been to our community meetings, and they have told us what has happened and that their properties, supposedly they're gonna get fair market value. It has not happened. That's why this line is very different, because we have those people coming to our communities, telling us what happened to them, and they are fearful for us, and we are fearful for ourselves.
All right, Jeff, did you want to say?
I just want to say that I think that part about the investment part is one of the reasons that the county, we've been talking about, and also Councilmember Ellison, about that the cities and the counties own some of these tax forfeiture properties, and what can we do to potentially use that as an asset for the anti-displacement teams, so that they just don't go out to open market and they just don't pass into people who aren't going to use that. So I think you're going up this same part we are, which is we need to hold on to those as assets for anti-displacement.
Sure.
And so we're waiting for your policy recommendations, but we are very mindful of the fact that there's a bunch of properties that are not owned by private ownership, and that we need to do something with them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I will add, I think in the data, the presence of outside institutional investment has only increased since 2008. And so I don't necessarily think that's specific to this alignment, but when we're talking about big infrastructure projects in general and the opportunity for redevelopment, we only see this type of investment increase, and then we see the effects that has on tenants in properties owned by institutional investors who don't live in the state, which will probably be important to pay close attention to as this project continues.
Any other comments or questions from the committee members? All right.
If I could just do one follow-up too.
Kathy, yes.
If any of you are hearing from your constituents or people in your communities about anti-displacement, maybe concerns, ideas, if you could kind of pass that through to the project team so that we can be aware of that. And we're always welcome to knowing more about what people are thinking, their thoughts and ideas, and being responsive to those.
All right. Thank you so much. I mean, this is clearly a rich area of conversation and discovery, and please give our greetings to C. Terrence, but tell him we have met Lee, and what a treasure. So that was very fortuitous. We love that you're coming back, but also maybe you're bringing some of the perspective from Oregon and other parts of the country to these important issues. So let's move on to our design and environmental next steps. We're fortunate to have somebody we know well, Nick Landwer, but a new employee for us, Kelcie Young, has joined the team. So welcome, Kelcie and Nick. They're really going to talk about the next steps, but also as you think about how you go through, this is where it really becomes, how do we actually balance out various concerns as we get into the details of design and engineering. So welcome, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. As we have the route recommendation now, we will be continuing our environmental review process. The environmental review and record of decision was completed for the previous phase of the Blue Line Extension project. So now, as the location of part of the alignment is changing, we are needing to continue that environmental review process. So where we are currently, there is a process called a reevaluation, where we work with our federal partner, the Federal Transit Administration, to determine whether supplemental environmental review is needed when we have a project where environmental review is already done. There's also some parallel state-level steps, which we'll get into as the project progresses. So we did prepare a reevaluation memo and submitted that to FTA for review back in June after the route recommendation. It recommends that a supplemental environmental impact statement would be the appropriate path forward. That is primarily due to the new locations that weren't studied previously, and that process path is needed when there are potentially significant new environmental impacts that weren't previously evaluated. And as of today, we did hear back from FTA that they are recommending the supplemental environmental impact statement is our class of action. So with that decision by FTA, we'll be proceeding into environmental review here, kicking off this summer. Just to give you an overview or reminder of where we are in the overall project development. This phase that we're in now is expected to last roughly 1.5 to 2 years. That will include environmental review, where we're documenting the impacts and the benefits of the project. Then we'll also have a municipal consent step, where the project seeks the city support related to the light rail design. We'll also begin engineering, looking at the location of stations, the light rail alignment and details itself, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, access to stations, and then also concurrently doing station area planning. So after that environmental review process concludes, that's when the project could proceed into construction. So to provide a little bit more detail on our environmental next steps, we anticipate that preparing the supplemental draft environmental impact statement will take us through next winter, and publishing that document in early 2023. There will also be that municipal consent step in spring 2023. And then also concurrently preparing the supplemental final environmental impact statement, which concludes with an amended record of decision towards the end of 2023 or early the following year. So that is the high-level overview of our next steps. Related to the more immediate next step, we'll begin preparation of the draft environmental impact statement document. In there, we'll compare multiple design options, looking at the impacts and benefits of the project, also seeking to avoid and minimize impacts and looking at potential mitigation. Once that document is prepared and reviewed with FTA and then published, we'll have a public hearing step, additional public engagement opportunities, but there is a formal public hearing step and a comment period. And then following on from that draft, supplemental draft EIS step, there will be a final environmental impact statement step where the impacts related to the project definition that's moving forward get memorialized, along with mitigation commitments that will go along with the project throughout its next phases of development. So that process would conclude with an amended project record of decision, and that formalizes those environmental commitments that would move forward along with the project. So if there are any questions, we could pause here. Otherwise, we'll talk about how design integrates.
Schedule. Yeah, go ahead, Irene.
Yes, so on the environmental anticipated next steps, are those all FTA facing actions? Is that a record of decision, and I'm assuming it's supplemental draft environmental impact statement and then supplemental final environmental. So are these all like FTA facing actions?
Yes, there is, since FTA is the lead federal agency, they own those steps, but we'll also complete state level environmental review path in parallel. And we can dive more into that detail in future meetings.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I understood, because the project schedule is really like our map that we're able to connect with from a community standpoint. And so this slide, just for my own understanding, is really facing the mandated process. And since I have the mic, I almost wanted to applaud at the FTA communicating with us. Did I hear that right? That the FTA communicated with us today? You know, they don't always communicate quickly. That's a very fast timeline. And I really think it is just a reflection of the 23 months of the last 23 months of work from thousands and thousands of people. It really is kind of a signal of confidence that we are, pursuing an appropriate mission, and I want to acknowledge and thank the staff for that work as well. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. All right, the important issue resolution process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We get asked a lot of times, from the public and just in different meetings and so on of, how does the project team pull together our technical design information? Where do we come up with it? And it really is a collaborative effort. This is, as we're going through with our design, when we have public meetings, we're getting input from the community, we're listening to that, what their needs are, what their desires are, their ideas that they have going forward. The advisory committees, as we get together, and the information we get out of these advisory committees is also very important. And then our project partners are a very important part of this process. So as we were going into our route recommendation, we were meeting with our project partners on a regular basis. And what we had was issues identifications to help us inform what that route recommendation would be. As we are now transitioning into this next step, into the environmental work, we're evolving those meetings and that process into what we call an issues resolution process. We'll still identify issues as they come up and as we're going through design, but now is when we try to resolve those and come up with the work that informs the environmental work and informs what those mitigation efforts are for this. So our issues resolution teams are comprised of city staff and the project team members. We meet again on a regular basis. We have been meeting for the last 23, 24 months with their project partners. Some of our partners we're going to start meeting more often now, similar to what we did, a few years back. More on maybe monthly or as needed basis more frequently. We want to make sure that during this time we're developing a full list of engineering and design issues. We track those of what those issues are and whose court it's in and how we're going to resolve it, and then when we resolve it. So we update that regularly at these meetings, and then part of the result of that is as we come back to for information to advisory committees, we report back to you status and what we're doing and what we've worked on and some of the things that we've worked through. So this work is all very important that we get this together, that we document it, that we resolve these issues, and then we get those incorporated into our design. So I have some slides here that just are really examples of work that we're working on with each one of our project partners along the corridor, starting up in Brooklyn Park, where we weren't affected by the freight rail alignment. We were really at 90% plans in that location, but we still need to pull those off the shelf, and things have changed since we've done this. So, maybe developments have happened, developments are underway along that community, or our requirements have changed. One example is stormwater requirements. Since we did our original plans, have gotten a little bit more not so much restrictive, but more onus on us to address those. Also, some of the requirements of rainfall events, for instance, that they have become more frequent, that they're more intense. So we need to make sure that that's incorporated as we're going through our design. So we'll look at our plans there, update for those designed and for the developments along there. Another issue in Brooklyn Park is as we get farther south at 63rd Avenue, we had have a station at the Park and Ride in that location. Before, it was tucked in between the freight rail corridor and County Road 81. Now it's moving out about 90 feet, but that makes a difference in how we access that station, how it's connected, how we get folks there safely. So this will be one of the other issues that we'll be evaluating, one of many. As we move down the road into Crystal, one of the key factors there in Crystal is evaluating traffic capacity along County Road 81. Really, the important part of the traffic capacity is intersection operations, and how do they work with the traffic going through there and with light rail in that area. So we'll roll up our sleeves here and really start working on that a lot more. The example slide up here is one of the options that we have at Bass Lake Road to look at how we address the traffic operations at that intersection. And this shows an interchange with the through lanes of County Road 81 going over Bass Lake Road, and it also shows a station that's at grade. So this is an option that gives us some opportunity to really potentially improve the intersection operation from how it is today, but also get a station in a location that's safe and convenient and easy to access. In Robbinsdale, we know we have a lot of work to do in Robbinsdale. One of the key things is how the design fits within Robbinsdale and the downtown, and how we work on station placement there. We've identified that downtown Robbinsdale is a location for a station. Where does that fit in, and how does that work so we can be a benefit to the community and be a safe place for folks to get to and from a station, and that it serves that community. Another option, another key issue is what's shown on this slide is North Memorial. This was an opportunity with the realignment to be able to get a station that would serve that area around North Memorial and serve the campus itself, but the communities around it and the parkway that's right next to it also. So how do we get this station to fit in there, to operate, to serve the many needs there, to make sure that it's accessible and safe and convenient for the community around it? And then as we get down into Minneapolis, we do have a lot of work to do. You know, as everybody knows, our West Broadway alignment, it's going to be challenging to work through there as we've kind of focused on that a little bit today. But, you know, coming from public meetings and from direction from this committee, we are looking at actively evaluating options along from Target Field Station to West Broadway. So our route recommendation had Lindale Avenue as that connection to get from downtown to West Broadway. At that direction, we're looking at and developing route options to evaluate. We're preparing that matrix for that evaluation so it can be clearly laid out what the benefits and what the impacts are from that. And then we'll make sure that we bring this out and have a robust community engagement for that work, so we can have those conversations with the community about what our options are. So, Chair, that concludes my presentations. Any open for questions?
Well, thank you, Kelcie. And Nick, I know you're just starting a process, so this is a little bit daunting when you showed us some of the challenges, but we're in good hands. Any questions or comments for Kelcie and Nick at this point? Riva.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really glad to hear the presentation and the things that we're focusing in on, all the corridors for this refresh of the project. In particular for Brooklyn Park, I'm happy to see that even though it's 90% complete in terms of the design, that we're being intentional about refreshing the design needs for that area. I do know that there are many businesses that were a part of the initial design planning that may or may not be aware of our current phase and restarting and the corridor project. So I think it's really good that we do the robust engagement to include not just new developments, but engagement with existing businesses and making sure that they know that we are involved in a refresh and we still want to hear from them, as well as doing robust engagement so that, as Commissioner mentioned earlier, Fernando mentioned earlier, that we need to make sure that we have representation. And that means identifying where we have existing and past engagement gaps and talking about how we're going to fill those gaps, because there are many communities of all different BIPOC groups, as well as incomes and different types of businesses that we need to contact and reach and make sure that we continue those efforts throughout the project. And then I've also heard from community members that they want to get support in how to be a part of our design efforts. So what kind of tools can we provide to our advocacy groups, our advisory groups, and our neighborhood groups so that they can work with local municipalities to have their voice heard?
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Berry.
And to piggyback off of Commissioner Chambliss' comments about engagement, I wanted to know a little bit if, and I don't know how much it's mapped out at this point, what that engagement kind of looks like, and also the process of how entities or organizations are able to participate or support that engagement. So I don't know if that's engagement that's coming straight from like Met Council, or is it going to be similar to, I don't think it was it last year where there was the engagement cohort through Hennepin County, that RFP process, and I know they've done it different ways. So I just wanted to know a little bit about what community and those of us in community who do engagement, right, who are also engaged around this, what that would look like. What should we be looking for?
Chair, Ms. Perry, yes, I think a lot of the work that we've been doing to this date, we will continue to do with cohorts and make sure that we're having that active, robust community engagement, reaching out to them. We will meet, I think it's a great idea to maybe focus more on, maybe a core of businesses or, how to get them even more engaged. That's something that we are, and the community, interested in to hear that feedback, because we get a lot of good designs and ideas out of that, and we can make things work better for the community. We do meet quite often with property owners along that corridor too, just to so they understand where things are going, and we'll continue with that outreach. And then as we move forward, we will continue to have public open houses frequently, to invite folks in and have that conversation with staff.
Nick.
I'd just like to point out, for those who aren't familiar, these issue resolution teams are really a very effective tool that we've used on multiple projects. They kind of break down this big project into small projects, so that if you're interested in a street corner or your business, you have a small project team that you get to work with at that resolution level. So it's like a series of projects, and it's been effective on every transit way we've gotten to make sure we don't drop any technical, and we have good places for very minute feedback so that issues are resolved. So it's a great model, I think, that is just proven to be supported at all levels to make these projects effective.
Great, thank you for that. Any other questions at this point? All right, Elise, Kelcie, and Nick, thank you so much. And we're just starting, so we'll hear from you again. Our last item on the agenda is hearing from Mayor Blonigan, and just as a reference, the mayor requested that we reconsider and address, the co-location along the BNSF route, which was the original route. This is not an action item. We've actually made this decision not quite 2 years ago, but Mayor Blonigan and Robbinsdale is an important partner in this whole line, and I really respect and honor and want to give the mayor an opportunity to address his concerns, and knowing that we will, Robbinsdale, and as all points on this map are really important as we kind of move forward. So in interest of total transparency, we're not squelching voices of important concerns. So Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And yesterday I met with Commissioner Lundy and Chair Selly, and thank you for doing that in Robbinsdale. What I would try to do is, if you're at the table, is passed out to you, and this resolution that I would try to bring, which I'm not going to be allowed to bring, really sets forth our argument, and we have maybe 9 or 10 other extra copies for people in the audience later. The thing I would focus on right now are 4 different things. The primary duty is that we have is we should be passing this resolution. The primary duty we have is to the people, not the railroad. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can aggressively go forth with the plans we've been hearing today. Don't be fooled by red herring arguments. And I want to tell you what the Robbinsdale people feel like. And so with regard to the primary duty, even if it's not now, but it should be now, I don't know why in the country we and the Congress says, whoa, it's the railroad. We can't fight them. They always get their way. Something should change, and we need to ask the people that are in charge of that, the Congress that represent the people, to put people, in this case Robbinsdale people, ahead of railroads. So those things can be changed, and I don't accept that kind of a argument that, oh, it's the railroad, I can't do anything. If I was in Congress, I would try to be creative and come up with something. We're not trying, when we wanted to go forth with this resolution, we are not trying to delay what's going on right now with the route and the plans that we've been talking about all day. We're saying we can do that and still go to Congress and ask the governor and Congress to try to think of a way to incent railroads, and in this particular case, BNSF, to come back to the table and co-locate the 90% engineered, which Nick Landwer tells me, okay, it's been 2 years, it's probably down to 70%. The 90% engineered, 90% EIS portion of the corridor through Robbinsdale and maybe Crystal, as opposed to the 5% engineered Highway 81 corridor. We would like to go and try to make that happen anyway. We're farther along on that. You shouldn't be, we respect the opinions and the intellect and the questioning of the people around this table about certain naysaying or let's go cautiously with doing a resolution like this. Their opinions are smart and learned and legitimate. But when Robbinsdale heard that we were going to go down either Lowry or West Broadway, we did not say, oh, don't consider one or the other, West Broadway, because look at all the problems on West Broadway. You've got a narrow corridor, blah, blah, blah. No, we said, let's go forward, let's examine alternatives. So, and I could tell you a couple different things, like a concrete crash wall, for example. If Amy Klobuchar said, no, we're going to change the laws, we don't need to have 80-mile-per-hour crash walls like we have in the Southwest that can sustain the damage of a heavy rail train, we can either have no crash walls like we have in Denver and all over the country, or we can have crash walls that are engineered for 40-mile-per-hour light rail trains. So there's, and where are we gonna connect if we do what this resolution says and start connecting north of North Memorial? Those are things that when we went with this corridor the way it was, those weren't settled, whether it was Lowry or West Broadway. You shouldn't expect it to be settled if you were to pass this, which the chair will explain again, I guess, why we can't do this resolution. And then I just want to say how much, at least me, we respect the intellect and what everybody on this committee is doing. So the fact that I have a difference of opinion, or we have a difference of opinion, the fact that somebody might have been here working on this 42 years and somebody might have been working on this for 42 minutes, everybody's opinion to me is valid, and everybody's opinion is just as good as mine, just as learned and whatever. But I do want to say that despite that, I want to tell you what the Robbinsdale people feel like. A high percentage of the Robbinsdale people, a high percentage of the Robbinsdale City Council. We feel that, and no disrespect to you, we feel that Minneapolis and Brooklyn Park are our big brothers. We're the little sister. And while you might listen to us, in the end, this is going to go, despite the fact that we planned for this for decades to do it the way we liked it, in the end, despite the fact that you will listen, our most important thing is not going to be addressed. It's going to go right down Highway 81. And this request, go to Congress, go to the governor, and ask them to try to figure out a way to do something. This costs no money, unlike some of the other things we've been talking here, to go ask them. And it could proceed simultaneously with the plan that we have, and not delay the plan that we have. So it, we mourn the fact that this committee won't even say, hey, Congress, here's a resolution, could you try to do something? That's what we mourn, and those are our feelings, no disrespect to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate your feelings and your point of view and your articulate defense of that point of view. I will just say something briefly and then open it up. And it's true, Commissioner London and I met with you yesterday, because we take those concerns seriously, and knowing that the frustration of planning a line for decades and having this preferred route along the rail, the disappointment of that vision. So we don't not consider this resolution lightly. We consider it seriously, but I'll tell you, there's two really basic reasons why we're not entertaining that as a motion. Number one is that after 4 years of ongoing pressure, negotiations, and personally, as Commissioner of Transportation, several trips to Fort Worth, I've gotten to know the executives of BNSF well. I know 2 governors have talked to the CEO, including this one, to exert whatever pressure it could. Senator Klobuchar, Senator Smith know this issue extremely well, and they have actually made concerted efforts. So one of the difficult conversations we had nearly 2 years ago was, you know what? Are we going to take no for an answer? And are we going to move on and address this alignment, which has a number of issues that we have to face, and we've been hearing about them. But the co-location in itself is not ideal. The reason is the 2 reasons is, one is we really do believe it is a hard no, and we can go on about that, but that's our judgment. Second is that to actually pursue this is not without costs, and I think the largest cost is not just distraction, but the delays of going through a process of changing the route through tunnels onto the BNSF negotiations, because I don't think there would be any, but it wouldn't be just a parallel track. It would be, I think, subverting the direction and the momentum and the clear focus that we think we need, which is hard enough and complicated enough to make sure we're providing great benefits every step of the way. So that's our judgment, both Hennepin County and Met Council. This is an advisory board to these 2 entities as project sponsors. So not out of any disrespect. In fact, abundance of empathy, but also knowing time is money. We've learned that. And to focus and address this is why we're pushing forward. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add any thoughts or questions to that. Commissioner Lundy, you were with me.
First, I just want to thank Mayor Blonigan for our time yesterday to have a good discussion. Talking to residents of Robbinsdale, we've heard all things, but we've definitely heard people that are worried. I do support the chair's not hearing, and I want to say that out loud. So there's no I don't know where the commissioners stand, so I'm just going to stand out. And because I do feel that we have picked about the board and the rail authority, of which I'm a member of, and I'm appointed to this committee. I'm not just a member because I happen to be it. I'm appointed. We have the county board and rail authority has approved that draft. So I have an obligation to my board to represent that. I also believe, and I shared this with you yesterday, is if a person asked me if I thought this would do anything, I don't believe it would. And I say that with full respect, that to go back to that negotiating table and ask them again, I would have to lie to say that I would think it would do something. So I want to say that, and that's on full respect. I can't do that. And so it just doesn't feel, and I also worry that the route to get it from North Memorial to the railroad would go through residential neighborhoods, and that would open up other things. I think by entertaining it, it is also saying, I would have to look at the map, and I've got it up of, there's a lot of houses there, and that would be to do this route. And so I wanted to leave, I could sit silently or I could speak where I'm at, and I'll be happy to talk to any resident. But I do support your right to bring this forward and have this conversation. And I do think that's important, like I always had. 2 years ago, I was part of, I consider the insurgency of mayors that were very not happy with the idea of not going on the rail corridor. I sat with many people. I helped start the Blue Line Connect group of mayors. And so I just, since I've listened to all the steps we've taken, listened to that, it is very difficult. and you're 100% right that should a railroad have that kind of authority. As I shared with you, I'm from North Dakota. Rails have immense authority through farming country, and they have their own opinions on the power, and I just don't see that changing because it never does change. But I agree with you. I'm cheering you on. If we could change it, I'm all in, because I do think they tend to go through people's communities, not to them. So,
Councilmember Ellison.
Just wanted to thank you for your comments, just because, for any of us who have ever, for everybody on this panel and folks in the crowd, you stand up to advocate for your community, and you're doing that here. And I appreciate that. I did want to just say that, when I first got elected, the previous route, which we've deviated from, didn't serve North Minneapolis, and it was one of those things that I heard from constituents over and over again. We're being bypassed. That was the word that was used. We're being bypassed. And it's still a scary proposition, because as we've talked about, even going right through North Minneapolis, there's still issues that we're working through. We've got a whole presentation on anti-displacement. We've got to solve those problems. But at least with the new route, I see problems to solve, as opposed to in the old route, it just went around us, missed the benefit entirely, and continued to sort of affirm this notion that North Minneapolis isn't a place. It's a gateway to other places. And so I think that this new route, it affirms that. It has the potential to affirm the opposite. And so I just wanted to say that. And when I first came into office, I wasn't, beating the drum saying we've got to change the old route. Wasn't fully satisfied with it. I heard a lot of complaints from constituents about being bypassed, but again, was still going to figure out how can we make this work. And again, this is a community that has the most ridership along the 5, along the 19. This train's going to be ridden by folks in my community. And so both wanted to appreciate the fact that you're standing up and for your advocacy, but also just say that it's not like the last route was working for everybody. And so that's why I'm supportive of the direction that we've gone, and just felt like I needed to voice that. So that's all.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you for just a moment to speak, and forgive me for my ignorance on this. Is there a reason, because I feel like I've been taking a lot of notes of all these different problems and discussions that we're having, and I share a lot of the concerns of people losing their houses, people losing their business, and the corridor is very, very narrow. Is there a reason why we aren't and haven't considered, or maybe we did and it was a different part of my life where I wasn't paying attention, going underground? I've never heard that discussion in any of, whether it was the Green Line or whether it was the original Blue Line at Hiawatha Corridor. It's always been light rail. I figured as I'm sitting here, I know we have 4 minutes in this body, is there a short answer for why we've never seemed to say, hey, why don't we do what other cities have done since a very long time, and that is go down below?
You know what? That's a great question. I'm least qualified to answer. I don't know if Nick or Dan, you want to just, I think it relates to cost.
Dan, I've asked that question a lot at the beginning.
And maybe Nick, you could say it. It is, I think, a huge cost.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that I think it's an awesome question, that maybe if we maybe get a memo or an email.
Love some engineers on it.
Yeah, I think 3 minutes for Dan Solar to clear his throat would never happen.
It isn't as simple as because of this.
Yeah.
Right? And yes, I would say it's been considered elevated, underground, at grade, all different methodologies. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons. So we can pull some of that together.
Yeah. And you know what? We should have that understanding, whether we are brand new or whether they've been here for years. It's always a worthwhile question. Mayor Adams.
Yep, quick comments. We have a new route that we've approved, and this was supposed to be a time when we reconsidered the voting roster back to state statute. I think now is the time we readdress what that looks like for voting members. Could we put that on the agenda for next time?
We should certainly take it. We'll take it up in a future agenda. We did say that we would look at it again once we have an alignment, and we can take a look at it. We might keep it just the same, but
there is a state statute that is dictating what the makeup should look like.
Yeah, I think there's and I can get this wrong, but I think the state statute doesn't provides what a minimum, and I could be wrong, provides a minimum representation, not additional members.
Yeah,
But
I would
we'll look
disagree
at
with
it.
that, yeah.
Well, in that case, we'll look at it
Yeah,
hard.
look at it close, because we had some issues with that in the past.
Okay. Any other questions on any subject? No, not any subject. Me and my big mouth. Councilmember Chambliss.
Just wanted to say that what I've heard today and what I feel personally is that this corridor has done a good job of analysis, and we're listening to everyone, and I'm happy to be a part of this group. And hearing what all the issues are and the concerns and the needs and the requests is the only way for us to come up with the best possible solution, which is why I think the continued engagement of our residents and our businesses to see what our best options are in every city, Robbinsdale, Crystal, Brooklyn Park, Minneapolis. And I'm glad that we're moving forward to helping resolve those issues and seek the opportunities that are going to be best for all neighborhoods. And also that we acknowledge, and I was glad to hear from Kira, that each neighborhood is different and has different needs. And so as we move forward, looking at those different needs and those different demographics will help us.
And with that wonderful expression, thank you, I agree with that. We are now losing our room, but I want to thank everybody who has come. We are canceling August 11th because we realized we wouldn't have much of a quorum, but we are going to meet again. The work continues. Thank you all for coming. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman.
Here we go.